Hi everyone, welcome to the YouTube channel of UMass Amherst student chapter of Informs. Today we have the huge honor of welcoming Dr. Tymofiy Mylovanov, the president of the Kyiv School of Economics, who also holds the esteemed position of associate professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Of course, I will give a brief introduction to his career, but before that, I just want to welcome our guest and say Laskavo prosimo, professor.
Thank you.
I would just like how I mentioned, I would like to just give a brief summary of your career and what we are doing here today. But we are so happy that you are joining us here. So Dr. Mylovanov contributed to many realms in academia and economics and public service. He was the deputy chairman of the board of the National Bank of Ukraine and Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Agriculture of Ukraine. As a distinguished economist, he earned his PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and has taught at various institutions. Forbes Ukraine recognized him as a top economist twice, and Dr. Mylovanov's efforts in Kyiv School of Economics has transformed the school into a top-ranked business school. And today we are honored here at the UMass Amherst Eisenberg School of Management to welcome him for a talk titled Kyiv School of Economics, a University in Wartime. And today, before the talk, we actually had a chance to interview him and ask him a couple of questions for those of you who cannot make it to the talk. So once again, I would like to say welcome, Dr. Mylovanov. And we will start with a question that is, I'm sure you will talk about this in your talk too, but maybe we could hear from you again briefly. So why don't we start by talking about particular challenges or obstacles that your school, that you lead, Kyiv School of Economics, overcame that you would like to mention today?
So they're different in the beginning of the war. The war progresses into a more marathon-like changes. Mm-hmm. But thank you very much for having me first.
Of course.
Yes, and for such a nice intro. So in the beginning of the war, it's basically survival. It's checking up on people, making sure that everyone is alive. The school was shut down, closed down for the first 2.5 weeks. Actually, it continued to operate online after 2 weeks of the war, but we only came offline sometime mid-summer. But as the war progresses in the summer, we had to build shelters because for every classroom you have to have a bomb shelter. Missile alerts or drone alerts, they happen almost daily, and if they happen during the day, it could be several times. You basically cannot teach if you don't have bomb shelters. So you have to set up to redesign all the buildings that people can move to the shelters and can continue to teach or study underground. That requires equipment, that requires infrastructure, that requires business processes, scheduling processes, all kinds of operations. Then there were blackouts about half a year into the war, maybe a little bit longer. So you need to build an alternative energy generator systems, heating systems. You actually have to have separate supplies of water. We drilled in our own sources of water, which is independent from the city. We have multiple redundancies embedded in the heating. We even have our own food for several weeks in case the building is isolated and people are hiding in a shelter, or there's simply blackout across the city and everything is freezing, for example. Then the next challenge after a while is actually mental health and burnout. So as the war progresses and the physical threats become, at least in Kyiv, less of an issue relative to what was before in the beginning of the war, and as we create infrastructure to continue to operate normally, focus shifts towards mental health and towards burnout of people. And that's, in some sense, it's the most difficult thing. It's now all about resilience and endurance and support and helping each other, and how people respond to a prolonged war. It's going to be 3 years soon. Yeah, it's third year starting soon. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when the war started, you didn't have any preparation in terms of shelters and water resource, and you had to basically plan and.
Yeah, we didn't have the physical infrastructure. We had some protocols before the war. We didn't. I personally didn't believe there would be a war, but we did think about what we should do if there is a war. And we had some protocols. We designed them so that helped a lot in the beginning of the war because we knew what to do.
Yeah. And I mean, we also heard from the exchange students that we had from Ukraine here that it sounds like you are doing a great job, even though, the circumstances are not easy to handle. We heard from those students about the blackouts and the shelters and how they were still able to, be in a learning process. And
they're doing pretty good. So you actually can learn, and students, in my view, could be very motivated during the wartime because there is a very clear sense of purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
You need to provide infrastructure. It might sound crazy or bizarre for people who live in peace at the moment, or even for people who lived in war.
Yeah.
Because Ukraine has been able to maintain infrastructure and function properly during the war. If that's, we look at some other war theaters, that's not always the case. Yeah, we have cities destroyed, we have villages destroyed, but then people move to other cities which are protected by air defense and by troops, and they're being then able to live there normally. Yeah. And so people are motivated and students are motivated. So it's in that way, it's very rewarding to see. And it's very empowering to see how people want to learn and build a future.
Yeah, and I mean, thanks to this collaboration between UMass Amherst and Kyiv School of Economics, we were also able to get inspired from both the students' experiences and now your experience and your leadership and story. And so it's a great opportunity for us. And
UMass has been, among the leaders of helping Ukraine, and also has very multifaceted, complex, comprehensive, and innovative models of interaction. Everyone or most institutions, academic institutions in the world, have taken to offering relationships with individuals. So take a student or take a faculty. That actually destroys institutions in Ukraine because you take the best faculty and the best students and move them out of the country. It's helping those students, it's helping that faculty, but it is actually hurting the institution. Whereas what UMass is doing both. It's helping people to come here, but it also helps to work at the institutional level. There are non-resident fellowships. There are partnerships between faculty in Ukraine and faculty here. They write papers together. They present at the conferences. There are exchange students who then, some go back, some come back and continue to study here. So it's a very comprehensive and very innovative and very efficient system which helps develop actually the Kyiv School of Economics. So UMass is a strategic partner for us, and was through this innovative approach to actually working with the institution, not with individual people per se, helps us encourage development, and also helps people, because one thing you just take a person on a scholarship and bring, and essentially the person is on her or his own. Another one, there's this entire infrastructure between the institutions helping to have papers, presentations, conference, research budgets, and much more.
Yeah. Thank you for providing all of that information, and let's move on to our next question. What role does Kyiv School of Economics play in supporting the local community and contributing to reconstruction efforts?
Yeah, there are some specific, very tangible, physical things you can hit and know that that's been done, such as bomb shelters for schools. It's by now probably over 100 schools that we have created through our foundation, built bomb shelters. and that brought over 10,000 students in schools, in high schools and middle schools to study from online, because if they don't have a bomb shelter, they cannot study actually. And you need to build the bomb shelters in all 15,000 schools across the country. So we've taken our part, and we've shown, and we're very proud of this. We also have rebuilt an urgent care clinic in Makariv, which is close to Bucha, which was destroyed by the Russians. And so now people can get healthcare services. These are examples of a very brick and mortar kind of projects. But we also do facilitation such as training people or helping faculty in other institutions. Or even with UMass, this non-resident fellow program is administered both by UMass and us, but it's open not only to the faculty of the Kyiv School of Economics, it's open to the faculty, to the entire community. But there's also a moral support or empowerment aspect of what we do. When we have electricity, when we have heating, when there are shelters, when we have water, and Russians are bombing Kyiv, and Kyiv is in a blackout, we provide a sense of normalcy. People come and see that there is a future here, that students are studying, that they are happy, they are smiling, they are thinking about who they will become, and the life goes on against all odds. And that helps people feel that, there is justice in the world, and things could turn for the better. So universities have to demonstrate during the wartime that they are looking towards the future, that there will be a future for the country after the end of the war. And today this future is being prepared through education and research.
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, it is, for me, even like personally, hearing these stories is very inspiring, and I mean, it is very nice and hopeful to hear that future is already being built and is already coming. So thank you so much for that reassurance to both our viewers and everyone who is watching. My next question is, how has this ongoing Russian-Ukraine war affected international partnerships and collaborations? Of course, you mentioned already the collaboration with UMass, but what steps that do you have to take to maintain or strengthen these relationships?
Travel like this. I have to come and shake hands and put a face to a name.
Yeah.
So that's important, and it helps. Human-to-human interaction is really important. It's a person relationship first, and then institution second. So institutions are a combination of people. So of course at UMass or at Kyiv School of Economics, there are people who want to cooperate, and it's then these people, their relationships are formalized by some kind of maybe formal programs, right? So that's just one of the aspects. But there is a lot of goodwill around the world to help Ukraine. So our international cooperation has actually increased in intensity and in the scope post-war, post the beginning of the invasion. And I hope it will continue to be that way. So people want to help. The academia, the professors, the students all around the world want to help Ukraine. And that's also a moral support. Which transforms in me and many other people in Ukraine on a bad day, feeling not abandoned. So that's a good thing. But then you actually have to get things done, and getting things done sometimes is a challenge, especially during wartime. There's a bandwidth problem. We just can't get to all the projects, so you have to prioritize, you have to select. And it forces you to develop more meaningful relationships with people and institutions, because you cannot do a lot of, you cannot do everything. You cannot do a lot of average engagements. They're just not going to lead to anything. So you focus on several, and I think the war forces you to reassess the sense of everything and find meaning, a deeper meaning in what you do. So I think it's good to reflect on this, and prioritization and choosing specific partners is important, yes.
I'm assuming this increased support is in many ways, right? Both in research collaborations and also support to students.
Yeah, there's some financial support to students. There is collaboration in terms of research. There are joint projects, research and policy projects. There is physical interaction such as joint conferences or partnership. You would think that's difficult to do during the war, but in some sense it's easier not because it's easier physically. It's very difficult to travel, and people are afraid to travel.
Yeah.
But there's so much more motivation. So yes, all these kind of relationships and interactions, they become much more streamlined and therefore effective.
Yeah. While we are on it, I hope your travels to here were comfortable and nice, and I hope your travels back also go very well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, once the war is over, I'll probably go and hide somewhere in the jungle and for a year, because I don't want any more travel. I want to be isolated and look at the same tree every morning and eat veggies and fruit and forget about everything else.
Connect
it's
with
too much.
nature.
But it's this time. This trip has been relatively easy. We're traumatized and. By war, and so it actually at some point has a toll or creates pressure on the immune system and on physical condition on the body, and it's really a permanent stress. So I often now get sick when I travel, and it's not infections or anything. It's more like I'm tired, I cannot sleep well, or I have stuffed nose or something like that, and when you get on a plane, it's not very pleasant, and it's become a routine. So I hate traveling, frankly. I love seeing people, I love seeing you smiling, but I really hate getting on a plane where like the pressure. Then I have a headache for another 2 days, right?
Yeah.
But so this time it looks I'm okay, except that I sneezed yesterday so badly that I pinched my nerve in the back.
Oh
so it has to be something. So travel is at least for me is painful, but it's rewarding because I see people. And it takes 2 days to get out of Ukraine because we don't have flights because of the war, so you have to take a train to a border city in Poland. That's overnight.
Yeah.
And then I take a transfer to Warsaw, and the connections are not ideal. So sometimes you have to stay overnight in Warsaw. So there's your 2 days, and then only then you fly to another European connection, and only then you can get to the US. So yeah, it takes. It used to get less than 24 hours door to door. Let's say from Pittsburgh to Kyiv before the war, and now it could be 3 days. So it's. You better make sure that your travel is efficient, because it takes 3 days to get out, 3 days to get back.
Yeah, well, I mean, after hearing all of that, now I am even more happy that we have you here and in this interview. And I hope you're feeling fine to continue with because we have more questions.
Good.
So our next question is, how has this full-scale invasion influenced the research priorities and initiatives of the school? We again mentioned this a little bit, but maybe...
I think the key for us, the key for success of the Kyiv School of Economics during the wartime is that we abandoned all our past projects. On the first day of the war, we just stopped whatever we were doing and asked the market, asked the government, asked the military. We don't do military per se, but we do sanctions, for example, on analytics on sanctions, on dual-use components, which then Russia uses to put in missiles. So let's say Texas Electronics or Texas Instruments or Intel or some other American companies, they still, through third parties, produce something which ends up somehow in Russia, and then it kills people. It kills my friends. And we researched that, and we researched the path through which it gets, and which companies, and whether the companies are responsible or not, and recommend sanctions to the governments in the world to impose. And so that works, but it's a bit of an arms race or cat and mouse game. And you get used to it, but it's really shocking that Western electronics are being, it's just one example of research we do. Western electronics are being used to kill Ukrainians, by Russians. So, this is not right. This is not just. And another one is we study, for example, another topic, damages for Ukraine, to put numbers, to put evidence. So when there are discussions about financial support or post-war damages, repatriation from Russia in courts, there is evidence, not just words and assessments, but there is actual evidence. Or we provide support from analytics to research to project office to some issues on the resilience of the economy during the wartime. And we do many, many other things. But the key was in the beginning of the war to stop doing whatever we were doing and pivot towards the things which are the most important ones, both in education, in research, in think tank activities, in foundation, in everything we do in business school. So that's, for example, why business school started providing consulting to companies to relocate or rebuild, which have been affected by the war. The think tank was started working on sanctions or damage assessment or economic resilience. And the university opened new majors, about 8 majors we just added last year. And every project of foundation now pivoted not just to support education, but to support humanitarian causes in Ukraine during the wartime.
Are you also thinking that those projects that have been stopped, I am assuming it is for at least for a long time, you don't really see them coming back or anything?
Well, some of them was, it just, so many of these projects somehow are related. For example, we studied the effect of the land market reform. Now we study food security in the region. So it's the very same people having the same knowledge, but the topics they work on are different. Similarly, let's say we're studying the fiscal sustainability of Ukrainian budget, but now we'll work on the international financial support. So the topic changes and the previous topic becomes less relevant. We can still study fiscal sustainability or financial sustainability of Ukrainian economy before and after, but there are more pressing issues in financial sustainability, exactly the sources of funding and how the funding should be most efficiently redistributed to achieve sustainability.
My next question is about something that, again, we touched a little. Can you speak to the resilience and determination of the Kyiv School of Economics community in this phase of adversity?
So actually, yes, I think I wanted to mention that not all schools in Ukraine have been as vibrant and dynamic during the war. In fact, most of the schools are in crisis. There are multiple degrees or reasons, layers of reasons for crisis. Of course, the universities and schools which are affected directly by the war, let's say they have been occupied or they have been bombed, they're of course in a very different condition. Some of the universities have lost a lot of faculty. We are a smaller school, so we are more agile, less bureaucratic. So we're willing to create innovative solutions. And we also engage faculty which left. And we also already had better faculty than other schools. So that all, and more committed, because more ethically committed faculty whose values are aligned with those of the mission of the university and mission of Ukraine, of the society. So in that sense, it's easier for us. We already had the community which was resilient before the war. Many other universities have been, legacy universities from the Soviet Union, and they are suffering. We just had a discussion at lunch today that another university, which is about 20 times bigger in terms of numbers of students than us, it's a state-owned university, not far from us, and that university has tripled the budget of what we have, but they are 20 times bigger. So definitely they don't have free capital to invest in shelters. And because they can't invest in shelters, they cannot get people to come offline. Because people don't come offline, They don't provide moral, mental support to each other. So it's a little bit of self-fulfilling outcome. You have to have enough resources, and you have to show leadership, and you have to have committed people in the beginning of the crisis, so you can get through the crisis. Imagine a boat on which there is a team and a captain, and if the boat is relatively healthy and the captain is good and the team is friendly and constructive, you can get through the storm. But if the boat is leaking, if the team hates each other and the captain doesn't care, you're likely to sink. So leadership matters. Teamwork matters. Ethics and values and commitment matters. But as well as excellence in organizational processes. Strategy is important. It's become strategy on steroids because it's extremely dynamic. The environment is very uncertain. So all of this, all of what we learn actually in business schools become relevant, immediately relevant to be resilient. But of course, in the end, or under all of this, is just people. Some people want to survive and be successful and want to prove to Russia and Putin that they cannot break us, and some don't. So, I think in war, it is important to be together with people who are good humans. And that means, but you can't choose when the war starts, So that means it's better to be all alive. I think it's a little bit theoretical for the United States, what kind of war could happen, but who knows? But basically in your life, I think tragedies happen. And it's better to be surrounded by good people, by ethical people, by people who value you. So I think it's much more important than we're used to think, that it matters who your friends are, who your colleagues are. It matters that you are honest to yourself, and it matters that you surround yourself with good humans.
That's an amazing advice. Yeah. Of course, it works in your exceptional situation, but
it probably works in personal situations.
Yes.
Even a person has a crisis or something didn't work out, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has a tragedy. A 3-year-old who cannot reach, I remember myself, I couldn't reach to a table, and it was a tragedy, because parents were eating on the table and I couldn't reach to the table. It was a personal tragedy, and everyone laughed it off. No, it's the tragedy because I want to be like others and I can't.
Yeah.
For an adult, that would be a real tragedy. So for a kid, it's a tragedy too.
Yeah.
So it just, of course, it's not comparable to a war in objective terms, but in psychological, probably it is. Maybe not to a war, but to another crisis.
Yeah.
Or people, breaking up after, marriage or love, or losing a child or losing a parent. All of us go through losing parents, and it's always a traumatic experience. Because these are the people who brought us to this world. And I think we rely on support of other humans around it. And it's not worth selling yourself short. Just, the war taught me that it is important that you're surrounded by good people.
Let's move on to the next question after these excellent advice. Are there any specific initiatives or projects the university is undertaking to support students, faculty, or staff directly affected by the war?
Well, the simplest one we have, and perhaps the most, the largest in terms of financial amount, is a program of scholarships for people who are refugees from the war, whose parents died, overkilled, people who are IDPs, internally displaced, basically war affected. So if a person is war affected in some way, we waive tuition, we provide support, we want that person to have access to education because that's our response to the tragedy of that person. We want that person to build a future by himself or herself through what we can offer, which is education. So that's the main thing. We think during the wartime, access to education is critical. Access to good education is critical, not just education. But we also think if Ukraine doesn't have access to good education, we're going to lose the new generations of people. They will leave the country. If we don't have good universities, they will leave the country. So to the talent, we have to provide universities which are regionally more prestigious, more effective, higher quality, more relevant than competition, because otherwise everyone will go to across the border and study there, and we'll lose our future generations. So I think that's what we do. To everyone affected by the war, we try to find a way, and thank God and that there are humans, and some of these humans are rich, so they donate, they're donors. So these rich humans who are humans is the first place, because they are rich non-humans. I mean, they're Homo sapiens, but they're not humans in the sense that they're very selfish. Some people earn on the war, Some people benefit from the war, but others, sacrifice for people affected by the war. So I think that's the initiative that we care about. That's forward-looking. Then we have an initiative or some funding for people if they get conscripted or volunteer to the war, to defense, or their friends or someone gets conscripted. We match the donations or funding or support which is needed for people going to the war, because the army and the state provide a lot of equipment, but you can always do better. And sometimes it takes time for everything to get in place, but you're an army tomorrow, so you need some support. So that's the second one. Then there is something much more difficult, and we don't know what to do about this really, is that we have a lot of alumni and students who have been killed in the war, in the military. In some programs we have as many as 15% killed. So, every 10th, every 7th alum has been killed in MBA programs. It was military-related, veteran-related program, but all of the, 70% of the alums of that program got mobilized in the first days of the war, and many, many of them have been killed. So we want to record their stories. So we now have a program, it's done through foundation, where we go and collect information about them and create their stories, the stories of their life. And in that way, we want to provide memory so that they're always alive in the memory of people. So there are multiple programs, but basically some are looking towards the future and others towards remembering those who left us.
That program you created with the memories, is that also open to public, or is it in the university?
That's for the university. We just don't have yet the resources. Well, I had an idea, and our provost had an idea of creating 1,000 stories of survivors of war. So we wanted to talk to people from the occupied territories and interview them and digitalize their stories. But we haven't got the bandwidth to do that. We have a memory studies program, and maybe it's ongoing, but maybe we'll get to it. I hope we get to it. We cannot get everything done.
Of course, you have.
But we hope to get to that too. Yes.
Of course. You have a lot in your plate, and you have to prioritize. Our last question, Dr. Mylovanov, is what message would you like to convey to the broader community, both within Ukraine and internationally, about Kyiv School of Economics' role and commitment during this challenging time? You already provided so many invaluable insights, but yeah.
So I think the role of a university is to be a part of the community, but also to maintain democratic practices during the wartime, because the war has this tendency of making everything or painting everything in terms of black and white, good and bad guys. But democracy is much more complex, and people are much more complex, and not everyone is the same, and there are tough questions, ethical questions, and we want to continue to discuss those questions freely. And it's very difficult to discuss certain topics freely during the war. Why? Because it's very emotional for people. And also because the power becomes centralized, the state becomes much more prominent, because the society gets mobilized to defend itself. So the trade-off between national security and freedom of speech, for example, or just general freedoms, tends to be shifted towards national security. And the universities are the places in which the practices of freedoms have to be protected so that post-war, the democracy can continue to flourish. Now, democracy is in many ways, I think, in a crisis, because democracy requires an informed decision-making by voters. Not just by voters, by citizens. Citizens have to be informed, and in order to be informed, they have to be educated, so they can also get the information, but also understand and comprehend that information. And so universities have the responsibility during the war to continue to teach, so that the citizens continue to be educated and informed. Now, I think that's a challenge in developed democracies too, including the United States or the EU or other countries. But in the war, it becomes even more conspicuous. And the last one is that you have to basically provide hope. We talked a little bit about this, how universities which function normally during the war demonstrate that there will be future generations of leaders and decision makers in the country. So the country has a future. Because while our society, our military defends us, we all have to, in university environments also, we have to study even more to understand the way forward.
Thank you so much for that great answer. Professor, we have finished our questions, and unfortunately, I mean, of course, I wish we could talk more and I could ask you a lot of questions, but you also have a very busy schedule today, and you have a talk here at Eisenberg School of Management that is scheduled for today. So thank you so much once again for this tremendously important insights and being with us here today and making time in this busy day to be a guest in our YouTube channel. Any last words? Yeah.
No, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, you're fantastic. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for watching our video. We discussed very important subjects, some serious topics, but it was such a pleasure to have our guest here.
The pleasure is mine, really. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Continue to support us, and thank you so much for watching.